Greetings. This is a response video to Salohcin's video. You'll have the link in the description to it. I do have quite a few notes because he said a heck of a lot, and I really don't want to forget anything, leave anything out or whatnot. But to the first point of whether identity is the self, or whether it is what is expressed to others. I feel in a pure sense that identity is the self, and it encompasses everything that you like and how you express that. I also think that it comes from the act of asking questions like these that you present and finding one's own answers to them. But I think what most people think of in the moment as identity is almost entirely the expression of it. How they interact with other people, the things they choose to wear, and how they express themselves physically. I agree that you can't be a nice elitist. That's really kind of like saying that one can be a KKK member full of compassion for all races and creeds. Not sure if you were referring to my video along with others or not, but to be clear on my point on elitism, I only suggested that one doesn't need to be an elitist to be an asshole, and that often goths seem to be incorrectly labeling people who are being assholes as elitists in order to be more scathing towards them and essentially shame them into submission or at least silence. I personally think the true definition of goth has evolved, that it no longer can be restrained to just being defined as post-punk, death rock, 80s, etc. This is why I'm very enthusiastic in trying to disassociate us with things like nu and pastel and the like, because I've seen that the definition has changed, and I want to do what I can to ensure that the definition that has evolved to pertain to me doesn't evolve into something that is quite emphatically not me. Now, that's completely self-serving, and I'll fully admit that. Also, in relation to what you were saying about someone claiming to be goth when their self-expression doesn't seem to be goth in any way, I'm unwilling to give any one or a few people the power to change what goth is, what this culture is defined as. To me, that's the same as someone vacationing on an island and deciding that they're part of the native culture, even though they have no common interests or style other than maybe they wear sandals and the native culture do as well. I'll agree with what you've posed about goth as a label being whatever someone wants it to be. However, if someone wants it to be something very different from what the majority of others consider it to be, that someone's label is essentially useless, because it can't be used to relate to the same thing that others perceive it to be related to. I mean, that's what labeling is all about. It's so that we can understand what we're talking about, even though what we're talking about may not be present in the moment. I can think of myself as a giraffe all I want, but that thought process is completely useless and pointless because nobody else is going to think I'm a giraffe. They might think I'm crazy, but that's a different concept altogether. To bring this back to the use of goth in relation to pastel, nu, hipster, and all of those people's idea that what they do as being goth is essentially pointless because the larger society doesn't understand what they do as being goth, until or unless the definition on the part of the larger society changes. It's that change that I personally don't want to see happen. I don't feel that goth has or should have many definitions, as you suggest, because that forces it to lose meaning. Instead, as I've mentioned, I see the one label as having evolved and changed throughout the eons, from tribe through the architecture into the literature and the music genre, to culminate in the culture that it refers to now. If a person doesn't use the modern definition, then they're contributing to confusion over the meaning. The exclusion to that I have come up with is, say, like university classes about Gothic literature, about Gothic architecture, specific things like that. I think we can all understand that when it's used in those kinds of connotations, that it is specifically just about that concept, that one thing, and isn't intended to denote the culture as a whole. In your example of the 4 people in the room who claim to be goth, considering the culture as an ambiance, as I do, allows for them all to correctly claim to be goth, and to view each other as being included in the term. Though I'll admit the goth by heritage is goth in an altogether different context, and I think all parties involved would understand that. I don't think the death rocker is going to try to tell somebody who is gothic by blood that they're not a goth. Basically, this sets contextual definitions outside the realm of correctness or incorrectness. Another example would be cool is a concept outside the mind. It's something chilly, a sense of temperature below that of being warm and yet not freezing. But it also defines someone who others like to be around or affiliate with because they possess attributes generally agreed upon as being positive in some way. But when you're talking about the weather and you claim that it was cool last night, due to the context, people are going to usually assume you're referring to the weather. When you're in a gothic environment of some sort and you call somebody a goth, because of context, people are going to usually assume you're referring to the modern culture, not being goth by heritage. You're right in that everyone has a right to their own opinion, but nobody has a right to their own facts. And when we talk about a definition of a label like goth, we're trying to establish a sense of the most factual description. Saying that you claim goth is dead and be right, while I at the same time claim goth is alive and be right also, is essentially label relativism, which is an awfully nice way to try to placate everybody, but it weakens the definition to the point of being irrelevant. As a separate issue, I'm not really sure you can pinpoint a music genre accurately as having a gothic sound anymore, because there are so many different genres involved. I mean, everything from, the original Susie and the Banshees, Fields of the Nephilim, to Nox Arcana, very, very different types of things. Jill Tracy was just in the most recent copy of Gothic Beauty magazine. Do you consider her goth? Her music is far closer to jazz than it is to anything that came out of the post-punk era. Yet, I think because it kind of adheres to what I've suggested as being the Gothic ambiance, I think you can define it as being goth. In the end, I don't accept the mainstream's definition of goth because I don't honestly think they care what it means. And I think their perspective is either, one, too vague to be definitive in any way, because they don't really know what goth is, or two, so obviously wrong and specific that it's just erroneous. Things like we all cut ourselves, or we all think we're vampires, or we all worship Satan, things like that. And I firmly believe that if we in the culture do correct them and hold to a strong enough definition ourselves, that they will change their definition to match ours. Again, because I don't think they care enough to try to maintain their own definition of it. I am, and I think many other goths as well, unwilling to match and give strength to the definition that the mainstream uses, because the term would no longer apply to me. Thank you.